The Sig Sauer MCX in Modern Warfare 2019 is known as the M13. It's actually a fairly popular, though off-meta weapon, very low recoil, relatively fast fire rate, and kind of low damage, which is the main reason why it's considered an off-meta gun. Now, the one we're looking at here will be the MCX from Girls Frontline, which is in fact based off of British police MCXs, which is why it does not use the 300 Blackout caliber, despite being relatively well known as the caliber for the MCX, Rattler in particular. In this case, I'm not sure if it applies, but I'd call this one an MCX Virtus, but it's just called MCX in Girls Frontline, so we're just going to call it MCX. Now, the first attachment here, and the shortest one I have to talk about, is the flash hider, or the flash guard. Now, this one essentially lowers the fireball that comes out the end of your barrel, and it lowers your bullet velocity. Unfortunately, true game data does not actually tell me how much bullet velocity is lost, and you can't exactly quantify how little fireball there is before and after the attachment. So, just imagine that the fireball doesn't exist and your bullets are traveling slower, but it's not ridiculously slower. It's probably below like 7% slower. And rifles in Modern Warfare already have a fairly fast bullet velocity. Now the laser I chose is the 1 milliwatt laser. Now inside the artwork, she actually uses a flashlight mounted near the bottom of the rail. Now unfortunately there isn't a flashlight in Modern Warfare, and I could go for the more visible approach by switching over to a 5 milliwatt laser, which made it so that the enemy can always see the laser, but I can ready my gun faster, better hipfire accuracy. But in general, I wanted to aim down sights because this gun has a hybrid optic, and if you use a hybrid optic by hip firing the gun the whole time, you're not exactly using the hybrid optic now, are you? But we'll get to the hybrid optic later. Now, the 1 milliwatt laser reduces makes your hip fire tighter by 32%, which is a fairly significant change. If you're in close quarters, you're basically way more accurate than anyone who isn't using an SMG or, God forbid, an LMG in close quarters without using a laser like that. So with the M13 being a kind of a laser beam rifle, at long distance you're not going to have much issue laying down the shots, so focusing on close quarters capability using the 1 milliwatt laser isn't a bad idea. Now the optic, I did mention this one earlier, is the 4x flip hybrid, also known as an EOTech with a magnifier. Now this one actually increases your aim down sight speed by 42 milliseconds, which actually isn't too bad when you see some of the other optics inside the game. And because it offers you both a 4x magnification and I assume it's like a 1.5 times magnification with the when the optic is flipped down, you can engage at long range using the extreme lack of recoil that the MCX has, or you can, flip it down, use a close quarters optic, and essentially just shoot the hell out of the enemy normally. I mean, most people use non-magnified optics, so it should be totally fine to use that. Overall, for this attachment, I'd say it's pretty good. I'm not sure if I just haven't played the game in a few months or if they changed something in a patch, but I thought this would reduce the aim down sight speed by a larger degree than it actually does. 42 milliseconds doesn't seem that big, but maybe it's because I've been playing other FPS games where in general the speed is slower. Now, in the photo, or rather the artwork, she uses a PDW stock. There is not a PDW stock in Modern Warfare, unfortunately, so I think I've done this in previous videos. We substitute the PDW stock for the skeleton stock, which sort of does the same purpose, in that it's a lighter stock meant to allow higher mobility. Although I believe the skeleton stock's main purpose is to lower weight, rather than the PDW stock being extremely compact and low weight, so they don't perfectly overlap with each other, but they serve relatively similar purposes. Now the skeleton stock is one of the better attachments you can run on any gun in the game. There's always the trade-off between do you want to aim down sight really fast or do you want to strafe faster. Well, it's kind of a compromise between them, but it's a good compromise in that it gives a decent aim down sight speed bonus and a significant aim down sight speed movement bonus. So you kind of get the best. You don't get the best of both worlds, but you get a good 60% of both worlds. You're not So you're not just getting a half measure that doesn't do anything. You're getting a an 80% measure that does do most of what you're looking for. And the skeleton stock is pretty much always worth running on every gun in the game that has it. It's worth running on the AK, it's worth running on the Bison, it's worth running on the AN94, and it's certainly worth running on the MCX. Then we have the perk Sleight of Hand. Now, the Sleight of Hand is kind of obvious what it does. There's no downside other than taking a perk slot. It just sort of makes you reload faster. Now, specifically for this one, it makes you reload 0.97 seconds faster. But let's not beat around the bush. That's basically reloading a whole second faster, which is significant. The AR derivative rifles have really fast reloads in this game because, as it turns out, pressing the mag release and shoving a new mag inside the gun works pretty well. Now, overall, I've been going through this one fast because it's a very straightforward build. What does this MCX work well for? We're not using a shorter barrel, so we're not super specialized when it comes to CQB, but we are running the skeleton stock. We're running a hybrid optic, which increases the aim down sight speed by a non-insignificant margin, but it gives you the flexibility to engage at longer ranges, which is good for the MCX because it already has low recoil. We're using the 1 milliwatt laser, which is hip fire in case you're caught up close, and that's also one of the benefits of the hybrid optic. You don't just have to use a magnified optic up close, you can flip the magnifier down and just use the EOTech normally. And even if it's extra close range, aka smack them with the muzzle, you can just hip fire using your 1 milliwatt laser. And this thing doesn't have terrible hip fire, and 32% tighter hip fire spread is a large amount. If it was 50%, it'd be doubled. So for perspective, that's just how it is. I'm pretty sure my math there is correct, but I'm not actually sure how Infinity Ward coded the game. It's kind of a matter of perspective. Sometimes games, when they say percent, they mean a different type of percent or interpretation of percent. So maybe that 50% comment doesn't apply, but either way, you're getting a much tighter hip fire. I already talked relatively in depth about the skeleton stock, but once again, it increases the mobility and CQB capabilities of this build. And because it is meant for the British police, or at least MCX's build seems to be based on the British police, it does make sense that they'd be looking for a more mobile rifle. I mean, if you're a policeman, would you be running a 20-inch barrel with an LPVO? I mean, it works, but you'd be operating in more urban environments or CQB, so the general gist of the build is nice. Nice in that you have the hybrid, which allows you to engage in multiple. In real life, it's not like a magnifier weighs 15 damn pounds. It's not too much extra weight. You're not compromising too much by putting on a magnifier, and it's not like they're gonna wear night vision while being a police. I'm pretty sure. Sleight of hand is literally just training in real life, and I would assume that if you're good enough to get issued an MCX, you're pretty damn good at weapon handling. So overall, it makes sense in real life to use this type of gun. It makes sense in-game to use this type of gun. It's more of a jack of all trades rather than a hyper-specialized rifle. It does take advantage of the strength of the MCX. Sometimes I find guns that are trying to push the gun into a direction that it clearly wasn't meant for, aka trying to turn the MP7 into like a 700-meter killing machine. Fun fact, there was a mission where I think it was SEALs brought MP7s to an engagement range that was simply too long, and apparently they're the butt of jokes for it because they straight up just couldn't hit their enemy from the distance. They actually had to call in reinforcements. But overall, this is a good build. I wouldn't mind seeing someone use this. Now, in my opinion, I'd probably swap out the 1 milliwatt laser for a... Oh, actually, I'd probably swap out... I didn't mention the flash hider, but I don't have the stats on the flash hider. But in general, the flash hider is kind of an insignificant attachment. It doesn't do too much, but it also doesn't ruin your gun. In my opinion, I'd take off the flash hider and just put on a foregrip, or switch the flash hider for a muzzle brake or a compensator, because if you're using a hybrid optic, might as well reduce the recoil as much as you can, just so you can laser beam people. Speaking of reducing the recoil, you could also just get the long barrel and play to the strengths of having a super low recoil gun by increasing your range so you have less shots less shots at a distance. But there are many ways you could build the MCX, and the way that Girls Frontline sets up her MCX is not really a bad move. It's not really, it's something I would actually run myself. The skeleton stock is a meta attachment. 1 milliwatt laser is a meta attachment. Sleight of hand is pretty much always good, except on the, I believe is the SIG 552. For some reason, it barely makes that reload any faster. Don't run it on that gun. I think the gun is called the Grow. But yeah, don't do that. The hybrid optic is fine as long as you're running other aim down sight speed attachments, which you are on this build. And the only thing I have a qualm with would be the flash hider, because the flash hider is, honestly, it's not terrible, but you can get a way more positive bonus for that attachment slot than what the flash hider offers you. So, I mean, it's clearly built well, clearly works, and, well, if the real British police use it, I don't see why you can't.